It all started on a quiet fall morning in Colorado Springs. I, Melissa, woke up and noticed my husband, David, wasn't beside me. At first, I didn't think much of it until I walked into the kitchen and saw a steaming cup of coffee on the counter. His coat still hung on the rack. That meant he hadn't left the house. But he wasn't anywhere to be found. I checked every room. Nothing. Then I saw the basement door, slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I walked downstairs and froze. David was sitting there, holding a woman I had never seen before. She looked younger than me, blonde, and was wearing his shirt. When they both turned to look at me, David didn't flinch. He just sighed and said, "Melissa, this was bound to happen eventually." I stood there, paralyzed. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He didn't apologize, didn't even try to explain. I barely managed to whisper, "Who is she?" David looked at me calmly and said, "She's the one who makes me feel alive. You're just a beautiful memory." That line cut deeper than any knife. I didn't cry. I walked up, looked him straight in the eye. "If I'm just a memory, then you'll forget me. But this memory, it'll haunt you forever." I turned and walked away, never looking back. But deep inside, I made a silent vow. This game was far from over. I left that house like a ghost. Drove for hours without a clue where I was going or what I was even looking for. Eventually, I pulled into this tiny gas station out in the New Mexico desert. I sat in my car, tears falling silently. What broke me the most wasn't the affair itself. It was how calm he was about it. Cold. Detached. Like I never mattered. 11 years of marriage. I gave up my dreams, my career, built a home for us, and now I'm just a beautiful memory? I wanted to disappear. But instead, one thought took root in my mind. If life's going to betray me, then I'll rewrite the script. I rented a tiny apartment in Albuquerque, went off the grid, cut ties with everyone, even my own mother. No one knew where I was, and I wanted it that way. I started writing down everything I knew about David, his daily routines, his habits, who he trusted most, who could be manipulated. I became a ghost, watching, learning. Every day I became less visible, but more dangerous. 3 months later, I mailed an anonymous letter to David's company, accusing him of embezzling funds from a major investment project. I had the proof. After all, I used to manage his company's financial documents. Soon after, an internal investigation was launched. David was suspended, but I wasn't finished yet. I created a fake online profile and reached out to the blonde girl. Her name was Ashley. Slowly planting doubts in her head about David's loyalty, Ashley started getting suspicious. She began following David, snooping through his phone, and found out he'd been texting another woman, an old colleague named Laura. Nothing explicit, just vague flirtations. But for Ashley, that was enough. One night, Ashley stormed into David's office and smashed his laptop in front of the whole board during a meeting. Someone filmed it. The video went viral. David's reputation? In flames. I had hit him hard, but I wasn't satisfied. I wanted David to feel what I had felt, the sting of betrayal from the one person he trusted most. So I paid a visit to his mother. David's mom, Margaret, used to adore me. Once she even told me, "You're the best thing that ever happened to David." But after the divorce, she went radio silent, like I was the one who'd wrecked everything. So when I showed up at her doorstep on a Sunday afternoon, she looked stunned. I wasn't there for forgiveness. I was there to reveal the truth. I told her everything, how David cheated with Ashley, blamed me for the fallout, then went on to cheat on Ashley with someone else. I showed her the viral office meltdown video, a copy of the anonymous letter, and even a few texts David had sent me after our so-called breakup. She said nothing for 10 whole minutes. Just sat there, clutching her teacup, eyes staring into nothing. Finally, she whispered, "You didn't deserve any of this. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." It was Margaret who delivered the final blow. She pulled all her investment from the family business, the very company David was trying to rebuild after the scandal. No one saw it coming. The person who took him down for good was his own mother. I heard the news from an old contact, and for the first time in months I smiled, not out of spite, but because justice had finally been served. I didn't go back to my old life. The woman David betrayed no longer existed. I learned to stand on my own, to rebuild from scratch. I became a financial advisor for divorced women, helping them reclaim control of their lives. I shared my story at small workshops, not to wallow, but to empower women going through the same thing. One day, a woman approached me after a talk, eyes brimming with tears. She said, "You gave me hope that I can survive this too." That's when I knew I'd won. Not by destroying someone, but by rising above it. And David? He's now a ghost in corporate records, broke, and rumor has it, crashing in his aunt's basement somewhere in Kansas. I hold no grudge anymore. Every scar reminds me I survived. I'm not a victim. I'm the author of my own story. And if you've ever been betrayed, remember this. The sweetest revenge is never needing revenge at all. I met Emily at a year-end seminar. She sat in the front row, and there was something familiar about her face, though I couldn't place it. After my talk, she walked right up to me, extended her hand, and asked, "You were married to David Thompson, right?" My chest tightened for a split second. "Yes," I said, trying to stay calm. She didn't beat around the bush. Emily said plainly, "I was the woman he dated after Ashley. He lied to me too, cheated, manipulated." Then she pulled a small USB drive from her purse. "I don't know what to do with this, but I think it belongs with you." I stared at the tiny black USB in her hand. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. That night, I plugged the USB into my laptop. A folder named DT Secrets popped up. I hesitated, then clicked. Dozens of audio files, screenshots of shady financial transactions, internal emails from David's old company, and voice recordings of his conversations with Ashley, secretly captured by Emily after she caught wind of his lies. I stayed up all night. Each file was another piece exposing the real David, not just a cheater, but someone hiding something much darker. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I forwarded the entire folder to an old friend at the Federal Financial Crimes Division. I wasn't after revenge. I was after truth and justice. A few weeks later, David was under official investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. His name was splashed across every news headline. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt at peace. Not because David had been exposed, but because women like me, like Ashley, like Emily, who once believed in a man with two faces, finally had closure. We were no longer victims. We were survivors. Emily and I kept in touch. Sometimes we'd meet, talk about fresh starts. She's back in college now, and me, I'm writing a book. Not about David, but about the comeback of women who were once broken. I want the world to know. You don't need revenge to win. You just need to live well. 3 months after David's scandal blew up, I got a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's about David Thompson." I almost ignored it, but something in my gut said this wasn't random. I replied, "Where do you want to meet?" We met at a quiet cafe in Portland. The woman was already there, dressed plainly but with piercing eyes. "You're Amanda, right?" "That's me. And you are?" "I'm Sarah, David's first ex-wife." Her words hit me like a freight train. Sarah didn't waste time. She laid a thick folder on the table. Inside were divorce records, an old investigation file from 2013, and several photos of David in situations I could have never imagined. He was investigated for investment fraud back in 2013, but he got away because of connections, Sarah explained, and he went by the alias Daniel Harris during those scams. I stared at the photos. One showed David signing papers with a group of men in Las Vegas. Another had him wrapped around a foreign woman during a time he told me he was on a business trip in Chicago with me. My hands started to tremble. "You weren't the only one he manipulated," Sarah continued. "He had a whole network. Women like you and me, business partners. Everyone was a pawn in his game." She said now was the golden window to expose David once and for all. "I know you passed evidence to the FBI," she said. "I have data they've never seen before." We decided to work together. I contacted my old friend at the Bureau, and this time we filed a collective suit against David, armed with Sarah's documents. The investigation expanded, this time into areas no one had dared to look at before. David was arrested shortly after. There was no more room for denial. When the evening news reported his arrest, Sarah and I just looked at each other. No one smiled, no one cheered. We just exhaled, relieved, because finally a long chain of lies had been broken. I realized sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places, like a message from a stranger. But thanks to women like Sarah, Emily, and me, a monster like David finally couldn't outrun the truth. After David's arrest, I thought it was all over. I went back to work, trying to rebuild some kind of normal. But a few weeks later, a plain brown envelope appeared at my doorstep. No sender, no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. You think that was his only secret? With shaky hands, I plugged the USB into my laptop. What I found were audio files. David's voice, unmistakably his. He was talking to an unknown man about cleaning up the Phoenix Trail and managing a bank account in Panama. I froze. My heart pounded. He wasn't just a con man. He was laundering money on an international scale. I called Sarah. She was at my place within the hour. We sat together, listening to every recording. Each minute added another layer to the man we thought we knew. "I know someone who can help," Sarah said quietly. "He used to work for the CIA." His name was Jack Monroe, quiet, intense, and he never broke eye contact. He examined the files, then gave us a slow nod. "You just opened a cave full of vipers." "What do you mean?" I asked. David wasn't working alone. At least 3 names on the international watch list have ties to him. This isn't personal anymore. This is federal. Jack told us to keep everything quiet. He contacted someone at the Department of Justice, and within 2 days, a federal investigation reopened, not just into David, but into a whole international laundering network. I started living under surveillance. Unmarked cars parked outside my house every night. My phone was tapped. I knew then I was in way deeper than I ever expected. A week later, I got an anonymous call. "Stop, Amanda. You have no idea what you're messing with." I froze in my kitchen. That voice, cold and threatening. I recorded it and sent it to Jack. He just shook his head. "They're warning you. But that's a good sign. It means they know you've got something they fear." That night, I finished my final statement for the FBI. When I handed it to Jack, he looked at me, and for the first time, there was a softness in his eyes. "You did the right thing." I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor. And this time, I held the cards. 6 months after David's arrest, I was finally getting used to my new life. A life without fear, lurking behind every corner. Or so I thought. One early morning, while I was jogging around a park in Denver, I noticed a black SUV creeping behind me. Way too slow to be a coincidence. I changed direction abruptly, ran east, and darted across a busy intersection. The SUV didn't follow, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I called Jack Monroe. He showed up in under 30 minutes. First thing he said, "Something's wrong, isn't it?" I told him everything. His face darkened. "They're back." Jack checked surveillance footage around my neighborhood. Sure enough, that black SUV had circled the area twice in the last week. No plates. Tinted windows. The people David once worked with were now trying to silence me. "They're testing the waters," Jack said. "Or worse, they still see you as a threat." I was moved into a safe house in Boulder, Colorado. No phone, no internet, just an internal radio system to contact Jack. But the silence was the most terrifying part. No one knew where they were. They could be anyone, a friendly neighbor, a delivery guy, even the barista at the coffee shop. 3 days later, a package showed up at my door. No one saw who dropped it off. Inside was a rag doll with a huge slash across its chest. Inside the doll was a note. "Next time, it won't be a toy." I was trembling. My heart nearly stopped. I turned on the radio and called Jack immediately. Jack and 2 federal agents showed up within 10 minutes. They dusted for prints, pulled security footage, and searched the area. Nothing. It was like someone was playing a twisted game of cat and mouse. "They're sending a message," Jack said. "They want you scared. Don't give them that win." That night, I sat down and started writing in a journal. My way of staying sane. I wrote down every detail I remembered about David, the late-night calls, the names he accidentally mentioned. If something happened to me, I wanted to leave the truth behind. As I turned off the lights to sleep, the radio buzzed. It was Jack. "They know where you are. Move. Now." I threw everything into a bag, didn't even grab a coat. The back door opened. An SUV was waiting. This time, it was our people. But I knew. This wasn't the end of the game. It was just the beginning. I had been relocated to another safe house in Utah. It was a wooden cabin deep in the forest, far from the city, with no neighbors and 0 cell reception. Every morning I woke to the sound of birds in the trees, but I knew this peace was only temporary. It felt like the calm before the storm. Jack arrived with a stack of classified documents. He laid them out on the wooden table in front of me. We found David's hidden bank accounts. But here's the odd part. One of them just had a transaction. I looked at him, heart pounding. You mean someone's using his money? No one but his people had access. And this happened after he was arrested. We took a walk around the cabin. Jack told me about someone who could help crack the case, a hacker who used to work for the NSA, now living off the grid in Montana. His name was Reed. He doesn't trust anyone, but if you speak to him in person, he might cooperate. I agreed. We'd leave at sunrise the next day. We drove through snow-covered back roads, the SUV shaking from rocks and mud, no signal, no cameras, no one knew where we were headed. But it didn't ease my nerves. I still felt like we were being watched. We stopped at an abandoned gas station to take a break. Jack was checking the map, and I went to the restroom. When I stepped out, I saw a strange man standing next to the SUV. He wore a black coat, sunglasses, and was pretending to smoke. "Jack?" I whispered. But Jack had already noticed. He slowly placed a hand near the gun under his jacket. The man walked closer, smirking. "You two shouldn't have come this far. There's still time to keep quiet." Jack stepped in front of me, protective. "We don't want trouble, but if you're looking for it, we're ready." The man shrugged and walked away. But I knew. It was a warning. We finally arrived at Reed's place, a cabin even more remote than mine. He looked at us through binoculars before opening the door. He was thin, with long hair and eyes that darted constantly. "I know why you're here," he said. "David wasn't acting alone. There's a whole system, and I have proof." I looked at Jack. This was the beginning of something bigger. Reed sat across from me, 3 screens flashing with encrypted code. He typed like he was playing some strange symphony, eyes locked on the data pouring in from a very unofficial source. "I traced the wire transfer," he said. "It doesn't stop at David's account. There's a final destination, a shell company in Delaware." I glanced at Jack. Delaware, famous for its ghost corporations. Reed switched to a hacked security feed from outside the shell company. A man walked out, tall, tan, with salt and pepper hair. Reed froze the frame and zoomed in. "Who is he?" I asked. Jack clenched his jaw. "Jason Miller, ex-CIA, vanished from the grid 4 years ago." A chill ran down my spine. If David was just a pawn, Jason was the one moving the pieces. Reed pulled up a map and marked money transfer points, company headquarters, and satellite relays. A network came into view, intricate, sprawling. "They're not just laundering money," Reed said. "They're trafficking weapons, funding conflicts, manipulating intel." David was just the tip of the iceberg. I stared at the map. Every line led to Jason. "And you," Reed added, "are the reason he's nervous." Night fell over the forested hills. I sat alone by the window, gripping a cup of coffee. I knew there was no turning back now. I was in this war too deep. Not for revenge. This time, it was for the truth. Behind me, Jack whispered, "We'll end this, once and for all." I nodded. "He thinks I'll run, but this time, I'm going on the offensive." Reed tapped into an old military channel and sent out an encrypted signal. "I've got friends in the Pentagon," he said. "If we gather enough evidence, they'll step in." "I'll do whatever it takes to bring Jason into the light," I replied. The 3 of us, Jack, Reed, and I, laid out the mission plan. A high-risk data breach into the shell company's internal system. We had only one shot. If we failed, they'd know who we were. And there would be no second chances. But if we succeeded, Jason's entire underground operation would be exposed. The dim light in the cramped room cast sharp shadows on tense faces. Reed, Jack, and I stared at the screens before us. Lines of code flickered by, commands executing in blinding speed, while the ticking clock echoed like a warning bell in my head. "This is the moment of truth," Reed whispered. "We're not just hacking a computer system. We're breaking into the most dangerous criminal network I've ever seen." I nodded silently. Every breath felt heavy. We'd waited weeks for this moment, gathering evidence, crafting a plan. And now, everything hinged on a few keystrokes. Reed hunched over the keyboard, eyes unblinking. The shell company's cybersecurity was tougher than expected, like a fortress of steel and fire. Layers of firewalls and triggered malware guarded every inch. "There it is!" Reed exhaled sharply as he found a tiny vulnerability. "I'm exploiting this hole before they know we're in." The screen flashed. Security alarms blared, a cold robotic voice intoned, "Intrusion detected. Initiating countermeasures." Jack turned to me, eyes ice cold. "No turning back now. The classified files started to appear on the screen, every line, every number making my heart pound faster. Millions wired, addresses, the identities of shadow partners, all within reach. "I'm at 80% data download," Reed said, voice taut. "Just a few more minutes." Then footsteps echoed down the corridor on the other side of the screen. "Someone was onto us! Speed it up, Reed!" Jack shouted. "They're coming!" We had to cut the connection abruptly. The data wasn't fully downloaded, but it was enough to shatter Jason and David's plans. The door shook as pounding sounds echoed outside. "They know," I gasped. "We have to get out, now!" Jack grabbed me. "Remember, this is just the first step. The real fight is still ahead." We packed up, powered down every device, and slipped out into the cold darkness of the Montana mountains. The next morning, soft dawn light spilled through the window. I stood by the glass, staring out at the vast horizon, heart burning with resolve. We had stirred a hornet's nest, and this time, we weren't just playing chess. We were ready to gamble everything. Jason Miller would pay, and the truth would finally come to light. The air in the luxurious downtown Seattle loft felt heavier than ever. The warm yellow lights couldn't chase away the chill inside me. Across from me stood Jason Miller, once a friend, now an unforgivable enemy. "You think you can mess with me?" Jason sneered, his voice sharp as a blade. "You have no idea whose hornet's nest you just stirred." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. But in my mind, memories of every betrayal, every lie flooded back. I knew I had to be strong. No room for emotions. "Jason, it's time to end this," I said slowly. "You can't keep playing dirty without paying the price." He stepped closer, eyes full of challenge. "Now you're going to see what happens," Jason said, pulling out a thick envelope and tossing it on the table. I opened it and saw a stack of documents and photos, undeniable proof of his crimes. Cold sweat ran down my forehead. This was the weapon to end it all. Page after page, photo after photo, I couldn't believe my eyes. Everything Jason had tried to hide, the money laundering, the dark contracts with dangerous criminals. "You thought you were smart, hiding it all," I said, my voice filled with rage. But I saw through everything. Jason laughed, each chuckle sharp like a wounded animal with no escape. "You think you'll win? This world's unfair, and so are you." I said nothing, standing up and moving to the window. The streetlights outside reflected my chaotic thoughts. But I knew one thing for sure. This had to end, no matter the cost. "This is your last chance to save yourself, Jason," I said, my voice cold as ice. "If you don't cooperate, this won't stop here. I'll hand all this evidence to the police and expose everything." He looked at me, his eyes sharp and hostile but flickering with a hint of fear. "You really gonna do that?" "Not just gonna. I will," I replied firmly. "This isn't a game anymore. This is a war for justice." Jason was silent for a long moment, then finally nodded. "I'll cooperate, but you gotta understand, no one's gonna be on your side in this fight." I nodded back, knowing the road ahead was rough, but this was the first step to change everything. The door closed and a new chapter of the fight began. I knew there would be many challenges ahead, many enemies ready to fight me tooth and nail. But deep inside, my faith in truth and justice had never burned brighter. No matter what I had to sacrifice, I would never back down. Seattle at night, its lights blazing, was not just a city of opportunity. It was the place that would witness the fall of a criminal facade.